The Great Silence, How Jon Stewart and the Liberal Left Betrayed the American Worker by Darren Fonso. Everett, Washington, when the voice of the people goes silent for 2 decades, Jon Stewart has been celebrated as America's moral compass, the witty conscience of the liberal left. He cried for the 9/11 heroes, scolded Congress, and reminded us that democracy is fragile and worth defending. But let's tell the truth. Jon Stewart's moral courage has always been selective. He found his voice with firefighters and cops of 9/11, and I respect that, but he has never once raised that same voice for the millions of injured workers crushed by a broken federal system. For 10 years, Stewart, Bernie Sanders, AOC, Sawant, Tom Hartman, Chris Hedges, the Green Party, and the entire progressive echo chamber have been silent, while 90% of America's workforce, the non-union workers, were denied basic federal human rights. They built careers off moral outrage while ignoring the quiet genocide happening in America's workers' compensation system. 1972. The promise they buried in 1972. The U.S. Department of Labor's National Commission on State Workmen's Compensation Laws declared that every worker in America deserves federal protections, that injury on the job should not mean poverty, homelessness, or death by bureaucracy. That promise was never fulfilled. Instead, Democrats and Republicans alike handed power to state-run systems controlled by chambers of commerce and insurance cartels. 53 years later, those same systems are still maiming and killing families, while Jon Stewart Sanders and the voice of labor crowd perform empathy for TV ratings. The silence isn't ignorance. It's protection. Protection for the same donors, insurers, and lobbyists who fund both parties. The hero myth that hides the hypocrisy. When Stewart took on Congress for the 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund, America applauded. He shamed lawmakers into action and deserved credit for that. But ask yourself, where was that fury when injured workers across every state begged for the same justice? Where was that outrage for the nurse crushed by lifting patients, the Amazon worker with a shattered spine, the roofer paralyzed on a job, or the immigrant laborer deported before his claim was even processed? They didn't fit the camera frame. They didn't make good TV. And in America, if you're not profitable, you're invisible. That's how Jon Stewart built his moral brand, by choosing which suffering gets a microphone. The great union mirage, and what about the unions? The AFL-CIO, SEIU, and Teamsters pretend to be the defenders of the working class. Yet they've said nothing about the need for a federal workers' compensation floor since Nixon was president. They partner with state insurance interests. They fund candidates who take corporate donations. They hold rallies for Medicare for all, but not justice for all workers. They use the stories of a few injured warehouse or Amazon workers to sell state health care plans, not to fix a federal injustice that enslaves the rest of us. That's not solidarity. That's exploitation disguised as activism. Comedy isn't courage. Stewart loves to say comedy is the banana peel in the coal mine. But when the mine collapses on actual workers, he changes the subject to Trump, pronouns, or the fragility of democracy. Here's the truth he won't touch. Authoritarianism didn't start with Trump. It started when America allowed states to strip injured workers of federal due process. When the right to medical care, fair compensation, and appeal became privileges controlled by corporate lawyers and governors. That is the quiet tyranny that Stewart and his friends won't touch, because it implicates the Democratic Party, the unions, and the media donors who fund their platforms. The workers are we, the forgotten 90%, are tired of being props for someone else's cause. We don't need another celebrity savior or political preacher. We need our own voice, a national movement for federal labor justice that no state or party can bury. No more using 9/11 heroes to sell moral purity. No more pretending that single-payer health care will fix a system that was designed to break workers long before COVID or Trump. This fight isn't left versus right. It's truth versus silence. And silence is killing us. The new troubadour, so yes, Jon Stewart, Bernie Sanders, AOC, Sawant, Hartman, Hedges, you all taught America to laugh at hypocrisy. But now it's time to cry out against it. The new troubadours aren't on TV. They're in garages, union halls, small apartments, and living rooms across this country, writing, singing, and fighting for the workers America left behind. We don't perform for applause. We perform to be heard. Because until this nation restores federal human rights for all injured workers, the joke is on us, and it's not funny anymore.